All right, good morning and welcome to our third budget study session being held on a Thursday morning here in the city of Glendale. Mr. Clerk, may we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Agajanian?
Present.
Brotman?
Here.
Devine?
Here.
Najarian?
Here.
Mayor Kasakian?
Here, may we have your report?
The agenda for the Thursday, May 5th, 2022 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on May 3rd, 2022 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Great, and can you please let the public know if there's anyone who's watching and would like to call in, what number to call in?
Number is 818-937-8100. Number again is 818-937-8100.
It's right there up in the top of the screen. Mr. Gulanian.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Thank you very much for devoting your Thursday morning to budget study session number 3 out of 7. We anticipate 4 more. But before we delve into the presentation, I'm going to invite Gary Schaefer, Director of Libraries, Arts, and Culture, in response to a request at Tuesday morning's budget study session number 2 that you, Mr. Mayor, had inquired about the number of visits to our libraries over the last few years.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I just wanted to respond to the query about visits to the library. Prior to the pandemic, the first full year we have to look at was the fiscal year 18-19, where we had 993,940 visits to the library. So this would be representative of a typical year and reflective of, on average, over 5 visits per community member per the year. So that's where we entered that. We then moved to fiscal year 19-20. Obviously, 4 months of that were the pandemic. And so we were actually on track to exceed 1 million visits that year, but in fact ended the year with 667,000 visits. All locations were closed at that time. During fiscal year 2021, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to switch our services to virtual. We lost actually a great deal of part-time staff during that time because we just didn't have the hours for them to work. And we were open only 3 locations, Brand, Central, and Montrose, and had only a total of 23,821 visits. But again, closed most of the year. I think if we look back at that time, I believe April of 2021 was when we finally had vaccines readily available and could in fact open the libraries as soon as we were able to, but still had to encourage safe distancing, couldn't do programs. In fact, we did an art exhibit at that time called 15,000 and More. Catherine Barger from our county supervisor came to open that exhibit, and it was meant as something for people to look from the outside into the Central Library. When Connie first proposed, the artist proposed that exhibit, it was called 5,000 and More, and she wanted to reflect all the lives lost to COVID in the state of California. By the time she opened it, it was 15,000 and More, and we had recruited a lot of members of the public to help her to create the artwork. And those 15,000 and more were reflective of the lives lost only in Los Angeles County. And obviously, you're well aware that that number has more than doubled at this time. Going to fiscal year 21-22, the year we're in now, we in fact opened the year with Brand, Central, and Montrose open. On August 5th, we opened the Grandview and Casa branches, and the second week of September opened Chevy Chase, Pacific, and Adams Square.
Go
Go ahead.
Please continue.
Just wanted to say Chevy Chase went back to its normal hours, which it's open 2 days a week on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So why the numbers are so small there. We believe we're on track to end the fiscal year with over 309,000 visits overall, which is roughly a third of what we had in fiscal year 18-19, but not operating at full capacity. Masks have just come down. In fact, most of the library staff are still wearing their masks. As the county has advised us, they're strongly encouraged. We're just bringing back programming now. In a typical fiscal year, we would have over 100,000 visits for programs alone. This year, we're on track with we have had to date 7,000 programs attendance because we haven't even brought back the story times to the library. So I think we're in the process of rebuilding, opening up the doors more, programs are coming back, and the public, in fact, is coming back. We're now seeing teenagers come back to the Central Library finally, and but we still have not opened up the auditorium for general programs. I think we've done one program there that all of you were in attendance of. So those things are all coming back, and we're also coming into our busy season, which is good. The library business is seasonal, and spring and early summer is actually when we get many of our visits. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions or comments? Thank you, Dr. Schaefer, for bringing this information. I appreciate you putting it in the context of the pandemic, so to show what these numbers reflect. I would like to also see if it's possible to provide, and it doesn't have to be done immediately, but as we're going through these exercises of looking at where to put our resources, where we can best serve the community, to have a proportionally representative sample of the visits. For instance, if, you know, it's very impressive that Central Library has had as many visits as it's had, but Central Library is open for more hours than some of the others. Yes. It wouldn't be an apples to apples comparison to, say, Adams Square Library, the mini library, or any of the others, Chevy Chase, which is only open 2 days. I'd be curious to know if we were to do a prorated or a proportional representation of those visits, where the libraries would compare or how they would compare in the communities that they're serving. And just so this doesn't seem like we're just I'm asking for information for the sake of information, is there's a number of areas where we can have intersectionality with some of the other agencies in our city. Pacific Park is an excellent example where we have a city library located on school property. As far as I know, that is the library for the school as well.
It is.
Right? We have Jefferson Elementary School, where right across the street we have a library that was, I think now with a focus of STEM established, but that school still has its own library, and I'm sure they could probably use their space for something else if they knew that they could benefit from the city's library literally directly across the street from their main offices. And, you know, we have the Glendale Community College Garfield campus being built, which is across the street from an elementary school and just up the street from the Adams Library. You know, there's a lot of opportunities for us to intersect and serve the public working together. But we need to know what the information is of the facilities that we have. Thank you very much.
If I could, I would like to say Glendale Unified School District does not have one master degree librarian working for it, so we are the master degree librarians for the area. I would also like to say that in the last 15 years, the library's full-time staff complement has been reduced by 20 people. So we went from 67 staff to 47 staff, so that is the reason our hours aren't what we might like them to be. And then the last thing I'll say is one of our strategic goals this year, and in fact, we're launching it this Friday, is an RFP to look at a facilities master plan, to do exactly what you're asking, Mayor, to look at all the facilities, how are they best serving, how could they serve better, are they in the right places, so on and so forth for the future. So that will take some time for that to be put together, but of course, once that report is done, we will bring that to you, and we're very excited to see, and really to answer those questions that you have as well of, you know, how are we best serving our population and how could we serve better?
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Mr. Galani.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of course, this doesn't work. Okay. As mentioned, budget study session number 3. This morning, we'll be presenting 2 of our larger departments, namely Public Works and Glendale Water and Power, or GWP. These 2 departments traditionally have been focused and involved in construction, maintenance, operation, and upkeep of infrastructure, which just happens to be one of the 4 major areas of priority for this council, as well as environmental stewardship, that the proposed projects and programs that you will see later on are directly related to those 2 priorities. By now, you are familiar with the new format of the presentations, but I just wanted to take a brief moment to go over the roadmap and how these presentations are going to go, just in case there are people who are viewing this session for the first time. So we're going to present two departments' budgets this morning, which will include personnel numbers, as well as the budgets, the department budget, which is the fund overview broken down by separate funds, and then departmental highlights, which will include some major programs and projects that are directly related to council's priorities, and then we'll have time for question and answer. Again, for the sake of efficiency and to be respectful of your time commitment, I would ask that as much as possible you hold your questions until the end of the presentation for that particular department. We'll start off with Public Works. The Public Works Department is comprised of 8 divisions, and I'll run through them quickly. Engineering, that's involved in planning, design, bidding, and award of a large number of projects, as well as project management and construction management, land development, that includes watershed management, parking, that includes enforcement, fleet services for the entire City of Glendale fleet, facilities management, that includes buildings and parks facilities, maintenance services that cover sewer, roadway pavements, sidewalks, trees, storm drain system, integrated waste management for refuse collection and landfill management, and finally, transit that includes Beeline services as well as the dial-a-ride service. There are currently 308 adopted positions in this department. We are proposing to reduce that number of FTEs by 6. These 6 positions, vacant positions, have been graciously redirected to other departments where there are critical needs to fill those positions. And this is primarily as a result of the implementation of the commercial trash collection franchise. We also shifted the rest of the crew to the residential trash collection service to enhance that for single-family homes as well as multifamily buildings of up to 5 units. The budget for Public Works Department contains 20 separate funds. Obviously, I'm not going to go over every single one of them. And for the sake of consistency, I'll just cover the significant dollar amount of funds as well as the delta, the changes, whether it's increase or decrease. In 101, as you've seen with other departments, the general fund primarily covers salaries and benefits, PERS, the medical insurance cost. In this fund, there's also a increase of approximately $500,000 for fleet equipment rentals, IT service for $103,000, and this is cost allocated, and building maintenance services, $50,000 additional request. Is 7% normal cost attributed to these changes, cost increase, I should say. In 107, Measure S, General Fund, there's a reduction of $300,000. Yes, $300,000 as we continue using some of last year's funding that council had appropriated to complete some of our ongoing projects. And these include pedestrian and bike lane implementation plan, street art project, citywide traffic study, and forestry. This is to achieve the council's adopted goal of 25% tree canopy. School crossing guard at the for $530,000, and indigenous tree and park tree maintenance for $315,000. In 2116, it's just a small, under $500,000 grant fund. The parking fund, this is the requested increase is for replacement of the elevator at the marketplace parking, an amount of $500,000, and an increase of $230,000 LA County court fees for processing parking citations. Measure M, the major appropriations include Vision Zero study in collaboration with community development, $400,000 for pedestrian safety implementation. Past year projects that are continuing are Slow Streets, Space 134 transportation study, Complete Streets, as well as bicycle transportation planning, an amount of $120. And these are just highlights of some of the projects that are being funded out of Measure M. Measure M, local return. We also have a Measure M sub-regional fund. There's a decrease primarily due to a portion of this fund that we will be using to, as you recall, the purchase of 5 electric buses that council has approved. Measure W fund, there's an increase of $802,000. We anticipate an additional appropriation of about $1.9 million. This is primarily for stormwater capture and treatment program. Measure R, two funds, the local return. There's a decrease in capital outlay of $2 million. Again, this was partially to fund another part of those 5 electric bus purchases. The Measure R regional fund, there's also a decrease in this fund. There's no new appropriation this year being requested, but there are projects, for example, on South Central, North Verdugo, and North Glendale Avenue that will be going to the Metro Board in July for approval. And upon approval of those funding agreements, we'll bring those back to City Council for appropriation in due time. And these include also the pavement rehab project on Broadway for $1.65 million and downtown traffic signal synchronization for approximately $833,000. Transit Prop A local return fund. The project appropriation we are requesting is for 2 new council-approved or directed projects, namely bus bench and shelter purchase for $500,000, as well as upgrades to our bus technology for $440,000. Moving on to the rest of the funds, you see a Transit Prop C local return fund. The appropriation we requesting for in the amount of $1.3 million will be for the refurbishment of the transportation center. In 401 Capital Improvement Fund, the major projects we're requesting appropriation for include the replacement of the roof on the Central Library, where we recently finalized the settlement as part of that lawsuit, as well as $350,000 in the Brand Library elevator improvements, and $200,000 HVAC replacement at various facilities. In 4011, Measure S, again, and capital improvements, you see a reduction of $1.5 million from the previous year's appropriations that was approved by council, and we will be using $2.5 million separate from the additional funding that we've requested for to improve the pavement rehab projects, and there'll be separate slide on this item, as well as the seismic and functional retrofit of fire stations in the amount of $1.3 million. And I'll cover this in another slide as well. 402 gas tax, there's an increase in revenue. We anticipate to be around $770,000. The projects that we are requesting appropriations for include engineering services that cover project management, design, geotechnical testing, and traffic studies of 10 planned projects that are currently in the works, and we are getting ready to start the design. South Verdugo Road rehabilitation for $2.3 million. ADA sidewalk improvements and crack seal program for $1.7 million, bridge maintenance for $1 million, as well as street tree maintenance for $660,000. In 525 sewer fund, you'll see an increase of $5.1 million, and this is chiefly due to a $2.4 million in operation and maintenance that we contribute to the Hyperion treatment plant, as well as the joint LA-Glendale water reclamation plant that we own with City of LA 50% on a 50% basis, as well as an additional $2.7 million in appropriation in the implementation of the wastewater master plan program. And another area that has been of concern to council and have directed staff to proceed with is the citywide sewer TV inspection. The rest of the funding is for a variety of other projects within the Hyperion and Hyperion Amalgamated Agreement and the LAGWARP agreement that, as I mentioned, we share with the City of LA. In 530, the Refuse Disposal Fund, you will see a decrease in revenue of $9.6 million. This is primarily due to the, as I mentioned, implementation of the commercial trash collection franchise. However, these are offset by a number of items in reduction of expenses. I mentioned already a redirection of 6 integrated waste workers to other departments, a decrease in purchase of fleet vehicles in the amount of $4.3 million, new appropriations for automated container, a reduction of overtime that we used to pay for the collection of trash from our residential neighborhoods. Let's see. Obviously, when we reduce the fleet, with it comes the reduction in maintenance, repair, and ongoing salary costs associated with operating that side of the business, as well as within our fleet services. Speaking of fleet services, 601 is that fund. We anticipate or requesting a $364,000 increase in the number of vehicles that we are planning to purchase. And these will include 4 sedans that we are switching to electric vehicles in fire department, as well as some light-duty trucks for parks and public works departments. The cost of gasoline is going to go up by $240,000 approximately, and $140,000 in vehicle maintenance. In 607, Building Maintenance Fund, this is the, we're requesting appropriation for, again, this has been a request or direction from council, the facilities condition assessment at a tune of $750,000. We requesting $260,000 in software system that manages our HVAC systems, lighting controls, and building access. Replacement of fencing at the Doctor's House, the Shoal, Ball Field, Pacific Park, and Wilson Mini Parks, as well as the Civic Auditorium roof repairs in the amount of $160,000. If you would, I'm going to quickly go over some of the highlights of this department's major anticipated and planned projects and programs. To begin with, again, another area of priority for the City's Council was to maintain or improve the current pavement condition index, familiarly known as a PCI. We are proposing to use $2.5 million out of Measure S, as well as $8.3 million out of State Gas Tax Fund, which is, to be honest, double the appropriation that we had received in the previous years, thanks to the council's direction that is going to go a long way to improve the condition of our roadway network. The value that this is obviously going to bring is safer and smoother road surface and prevent to more costly street reconstruction projects in the future. And the PCI that we intend to maintain or improve is at 72, which is already higher than the state average of all the cities within the state. Another matter that has been brought up by this council, and we have received direction, is efforts to reduce urban heat island effect. We intend to achieve this by increasing the tree canopy to 25% over the next 10 years, planting 1,500 new street trees, and construction of more cool pavement projects that, as you know, we have already started on as a pilot project. We are seeking $660,000 out of gas tax fund, as well as $1 million out of Measure S general fund. The value that will bring to the community is it will create additional cool and comfortable outdoor areas, as well as mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. To improve accessibility for public facilities, we are planning on replacing outdated and aging elevators, which will improve accessibility to the public at our facilities, including parks, libraries, and the Civic Center complex. We are requesting $470,000 out of the Capital Improvement Fund, as well as $500,000 in parking fund. We already have $135,000 in carryover funds from previous year. Again, another area of priority and concern for council has been road safety and mobility. The effort here is to improve the safety and mobility of our road system. We plan on accomplishing this by adopting a local road safety plan that will come to council in the near future. Council has already approved and adopted the pedestrian safety plan. So for next year, this will be a phased approach. Next year, Public Works is planning on implementing phase 1 of that plan, as well as the permanent slow streets, which will create safer streets for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists, as well as walkable neighborhoods and increased mobility. We plan on using $750,000 out of gas tax fund, and the rest are carryover from previous years. Seismic and functional retrofit of fire station projects that was previously approved by City Council. The plan is to complete the construction of these projects at fire stations 23 and 27. These are Chevy Chase and Western edge of the city, and also begin the design of the fire station 29. And that's the Montrose Library Fire Station that we had a discussion about on Tuesday, as well as the Fire Station 24, which was on Cañada, right across from Verdugo Park. This will obviously provide for a safer safer city facilities with improved utility, as well as protect these critical infrastructure and facilities for emergency response. We are seeking $1.3 million out of Measure S, Capital Improvement Fund, and carrying over $3 million that was approved by council out of Measure S last year. Another area of priority for council has been electrification of our fleet. This is to add electric buses to our Beeline service fleet. I mentioned purchase of 5 EV buses already authorized, modifications to the Beeline maintenance facility to support these EV chargers, as well as upgrade of the GWP infrastructure that could include new substations. This in turn will help reduce particulate matter, NOx, and greenhouse gas emissions. We are not seeking new funding for this endeavor. However, there is sufficient funds that we are carrying over from previous year. I mentioned the electrification of our fleet. There is a plan to transition our fleet to zero emissions. We get to accomplish this by working on finalizing the fleet electrification report, which will come to council in the near future. And again, upgrade of our GWP infrastructure to support these EV chargers, which again will have the effect of also reducing particulate matter, NOx, and GHG emissions. We are seeking $460,000 out of the fleet fund and small carryover amount from previous year. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, that concludes my presentation on Public Works Department budget and highlights. While I take a sip of my water,
Thank you.
I'll invite you to ask questions or make comments.
So I will turn it over to Councilmember Agajanian, but before I do, let me ask, there's a lot of capital improvement projects planned, and obviously all of it is needed, yet you're proposing to reduce staff. How are you going to be able to accomplish all of those projects with the reduced staff load?
Good question, Mr. Mayor. The reduction in staffing is integrated waste truck drivers and truck helpers who really don't focus, the area of focus is not on delivery of projects. There's no proposed reduction in engineering division of that Public Works Department that will focus on that effort.
And the project management will be overseen in-house, or will we have third-party project managers?
It will be a combination of in-house and outsourced services.
So for the outsourced and for anyone, a lot of these projects, we're seeing increasing costs right now with inflation. We're seeing some projects having coming back with 30% cost increases. Is that baked into this budget?
That's definitely, Mr. Mayor, baked into this budget. It's just going to reduce, if you will, our purchasing power. We are, as you noted, we've seen challenges with supply chain issues that's impacting delivery of certain infrastructure parts and we'll cover it primarily during GWP's presentation, as well as the cost impact. Unfortunately, it's unavoidable, but it is baked into our estimation that what we need.
Well, I don't want to ask too many questions. Councilmember Agajanian?
First, I have a very minor question. Let's say on page 7, you were reading 101. Let's see, where is page 7? One of those pages, doesn't matter, but for example, page 7. That's fine, let's keep it there. Okay, 1010. And you were reading 101. Why you are not reading the zeros? All of them you say 101, 107, 216, but it's typed 1010, 1070. Why you were not reading the zeros?
Councilmember Agajanian is primarily to save time, so I can go through them quickly. But the zeros are just common to all these accounts. This is the lingo we use with our finance folks, so they've trained me in that way.
Okay. Now,
We have an engineer on the dais, and a zero is very important to engineers. I support his comment.
Duly noted.
okay, now the next thing. We sourced out the commercial hauling of refuse or trash. How many employees you think they have, all 4 companies, how many employees they have altogether? Approximately.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Agajanian, I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm going to look to
I mean, just
Mr. Ambrone if he
approximation,
knows.
doesn't matter. Are they 100? Are there 2?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. These companies range from very large, such as Athens. They have a very large number of staff to smaller ones.
No,
So
I'm talking about how many employees they assign to Glendale. I'm not talking about how many employees they have.
I don't have that number, so I have to get that for you.
Well, let's say each one they have 20? Is that reasonable?
Again, I wouldn't want to speculate.
Okay, that's fine. But if you go to page now 6. Okay, we have sourced out our trash collection for commercial. All those apartment buildings which are 5 and over,
Yes,
and businesses.
yes.
And I don't see it's, if we did that, is not reflected on page, the full-time employees. So 283, it became 277. So what has been changed?
Mr. Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Agajanian, as I indicated earlier, there's a reduction of 6 positions in integrated waste management that are trash truck drivers and their helpers that we have redirected to other departments to fill critical needs in those departments. And the rest, and I'll let Mr. Imrani go into more details if you'd like, and the rest have been shifted to the residential trash collection of single-family homes, as well as apartment buildings of up to 5 units. This is to enhance that service, was woefully understaffed, and we were paying a lot of money in overtime to be able to cover those routes. So whatever was filled positions in that operation, commercial service, was shifted to enhance the residential service for trash collection.
And this is, I'm sure that each one of these companies, they have at least 30 employees, at least. 4 companies, there are 120 employees they have, which we were doing it. And to see that it's only reflected with 6, regardless how many you move the employees from one department of commercial department to the residential, still I don't see anything has been changed. This is my comment anyway. If you want to answer.
Sure, if I may, Councilmember Agajanian. One of the other things that we did, we took advantage of the commercial franchising. When we shifted the drivers over, we also took a look at the routes that we have currently. So we looked at reducing these routes, which reducing the length of the routes, which added to the, we added some additional routes, which took up some of the folks that we moved from commercial side to the residential. So that improved, instead of working 11, 12-hour days, that reduced their working hours to 8 or 9 hours, but it increased the number of routes. So that took up the other elements of the drivers from the commercial to the residential.
So that should show dollar amount should be changed. If overtimes has been eliminated and it's a regular time and the regular hours we are paying, so it should show on the dollar amount then. What has changed?
It's going to be reflected. We started the implementation in December of last year, but it's going to more fully, we're still, it took us a few months to transition, but it's going to fully show in next year. In fact, we are projecting that next year we're going to reduce overtime by half.
Mr. Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Agajanian, if you look at the slide up there, to your point, there is a $5.75 million reduction in the budget of that division, primarily as a result of the commercial franchise.
But at the end, you're still going higher than what you had. The total budget.
The total budget is for the entire department,
Yeah.
So there are increases in other funds. This budget includes 20 separate funds. The reduction of 5.75 in the refuse disposal fund that manages trash collection is only one of 20. There are increases in other, the other 19, I shouldn't say 19, but majority of other funds that hence adds up to a 2.3% increase year over year.
If you don't consider that 5 million, the increase is not 2.3, it's much higher.
Yes, sir,
It's like 4.7% increase.
which is similar across the board with other departments' increases.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brotman and then Councilmember Devine.
You can, I'll go.
Councilmember Devine, would you wish to go first?
It's fine, it's fine. On that same page, the general.
Your microphone, please.
Thank you. On that same page, the Public Works Department budget, the 1070, you have a $304,000 decrease in, so that's going to carry over, correct, to, is that my understanding? That's going to carry over until, what, next year, or is that going to be used? Because I hate to see that money, that funding sitting there, not working for us when we have projects that might benefit from that funding.
Mr. Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Devine, good point. That reduction is in comparison to what council had adopted in last year's budget. So we are just seeking, it's not that we're not asking for additional funds. We are asking for a 1.65 million additional fund, but compared to last year is $304,000 less. And that's primarily to allow the department to complete the projects that they had planned on working for next fiscal year. Come 23-24, more than likely we'll be asking for additional funds.
Oh, okay, all right. Next slide. On the return fund, you talked about the transportation station or the center refurbishment. Is that connected with the B-line and the the charging stations? Is that what that funding is for? Is that what the refurbishing is all about? Because that's a fairly new facility.
And Councilmember Devine, no, that's related to the existing, the train station, the building that we have. It's a very old building, so there's repairs that are needed to the actual building itself. There's the surrounding area, there are some structures that we have to take care of. They haven't been updated or maintained in a while. So that 1.3 million is a combination of doing improvements to the Larry Zarian Transportation Center,
Oh, okay.
not the new building.
Oh, okay. And there's no mention in here on the bridge to Griffith Park. Is that part of Public Works or is that
The bridge,
The LA Garden River.
LA Garden? Thank you. I didn't know. I forgot what the name of
yeah,
it
the
was.
LA Garden River Bridge project is a project that we're undertaking right now. We're doing the environmental phase.
Okay, and there's nothing in the budget regarding that project, or is there?
We have the funding, appropriate funding to move forward with the environmental phase of this project. And once we get into the design, we'll come back and ask for additional appropriation.
And Councilmember Devine, the majority of the funding that was already been allocated to that project comes from a state grant, as
Okay.
you recall.
And so there's no need to mention what you might be requesting in the budget?
Not next fiscal year, but again, more than likely the following fiscal year, yes.
Okay, all right. On the slide 13, that's local road safety and mobility, and you talk about the permanent slow streets. When are those going to be coming to fruition? Do we have a date certain of any kind?
Absolutely. We went through the process of redesigning the signs that took a little bit of time. And we are in the finalization of the contract stage, so it should be rolling out in the next few weeks, this month,
Oh,
certainly.
great, good news,
Phase
good
one of
news.
the project.
Okay, and on the positive side, I see a lot of your staff out there working on our sidewalks and infrastructure, so, and I've stopped to comment to them that, I see a lot of them, and good job, so thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Brotman.
Okay, so let's start on page 6. And simple question, actually. Responsibility for, or at least for some of the head count for the landfill has been transferred back to Public Works, is that right?
That is correct.
Is that reflected in here? Because how many head count were picked up through that?
We transferred one person from GWP that manages,
So Maurice.
Maurice.
Okay. But is there any other impact to the budget of doing that, other than the one?
Public Works was managing the funds, and Maurice, when he was over at GWP, was administering the landfill. So there's no changes in that.
Okay. But that head count, that's in here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, let's see, let's go to page 10. So I think you said that Mr. Galani, we've doubled the appropriation for road repair?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Brotman, approximately doubled compared to the previous years, yes.
Okay. That's a good thing to let people know.
That's a great thing. And we thank this council for that.
Because we obviously, we all get a lot of comments about that. And then you mentioned the PCI of 72. You said that's higher than the state average. Can you give us a sense of where the state average is, or?
Sure.
much higher?
There's currently a new study underway, but the last one, state of California, was in the high 60s.
Yeah, Councilmember Brotman, my recollection from my time at Public Works was they were at 66 the last time.
Okay. It'd be good if maybe you could give it to us offline, just some maybe the Tri-Cities or nearby cities, because, we get this comment a lot, and, our roads aren't great, but I guess it's important to put it into context, so people, understand where we stand, relative to other cities. I think all cities have had to kind of cut back after the financial crisis and have a lot of deferred maintenance, and, it is what it is. Okay. And just a general comment, and I bring this up all the time, and I think the rest of my colleagues feel the same way, but whenever we touch any road surface, I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to put safety first, and when I say safety, I mean, obviously cars, but also, pedestrians and bicyclists. And I, as much as anyone, I want to see the roads, especially now that I'm on a bike, and I feel all the potholes and the cracks, and I'm always scared that I'm going to get caught in one. So I definitely, fully support making those roads smoother, but at the same time, just want to hit as many of the priorities as we can. So, but I know you know that. I'm just kind of, for the record, repeating it. So on 11, the heat island effect, and I'm really glad this is, called out like this. I appreciate it. Can you just say, I know we did the one cool pavement project in that parking area behind Panera Bread. And I believe we're looking at another one. Can you just give us a little update where we are on that and what the next steps would be? I mean, how long do we take to evaluate whether it's been effective? And then, what would we do next in terms of rolling this out if we, like what we're seeing?
Absolutely. Councilmember Brotman, we're monitoring it on a monthly basis. We're going out there, we're checking the surfaces, we're looking at it to see how well it's standing up to the traffic, cars going back and forth.
Just the one
Just the one,
side.
the parking lot too. However, as part of the program that we have for next year, we are looking at doing another one. We're going to do a reflective pavement behind Thomas Edison School as part of our Broadway rehab project. So that's going to be our second experiment with reflective pavement. And we're also, as part of our Maintenance District 6 Phase 1 project, we're going to remove some of the concretes in the parkway and plant more trees, basically. So take away the concrete and then plant more, grass and trees and, all that good stuff. And as part of that, obviously, is the straight tree plantings, which we're planning to get to that 25% canopy. So there's a lot of tree plantings planned for next fiscal year.
Right, well, I was I know, and the trees, that's great. I was specifically talking about the cool pavement. So-
Right.
And so far, do we like what we're seeing?
So far, we like it. It's standing up. It's too early to tell. We installed it a couple of months ago, but it's standing up, and we're going to continue that experiment with the second phase as part of the Broadway rehab behind Thomas Edison.
Well, definitely let us know when you get to the point where you think, we've experimented, this or that technology is the one we like, and kind of what's our plan as we repave, because as we repave streets, ideally, that would be the time when we would use this material, right? When we're doing a slurry seal, we could be applying this instead of the standard, right?
That would be the top level surface treatment.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I think we're all eager to see that, see that get rolled out. Okay, on the road safety and mobility, so you said implement Phase 1 this fiscal year? And what's the cost of Phase 1? What do we estimate that to be?
For the Slow Streets program?
No, I'm talking about the pedestrian
Pedestrian
plan.
safe.
So the pedestrian plan, we have a series of projects that, as I mentioned during my Measure R report, that we've already implemented, and we are moving forward with the, with the next stage of that. So these projects, so far, we've completed 10 of these as part of other projects at a cost of $3.5 million. There are 5 projects currently that we have under design that have those elements, total cost of $4 million. And then we have, these are for the first 5 years of this program. And then for the next 10 years, we have currently 1 project under design at a cost of $1 million. So we are basically incorporating these as part of our street rehab project, and some of them are standalone projects that we're trying to hit the low-hanging fruit, so to speak.
Okay. And then that, again, Councilmember Devine brought this up, of the permanent slow streets. So how, I thought there was an issue with ordering the signs. They were on, like, there was supply chain issues. So we have those now? They came in?
We're finalizing the contract with the vendor, and they're ordering it so that we can roll out with the Phase 1, which is installing 100 of those signs this month, end of this month.
So we'll have them, we'll actually get them, we'll start seeing them out on the street.
End of this month, yes.
End of this month, okay. And you said 100.
That's Phase 1. That would be the total number that they're gonna install.
And what's our total plan after that?
So the total plan is about a total of 300 that we have a budget for. And, after that, depending on, the success of this program, basically, we may come back to the council for requesting additional.
Okay, and the 300, how does that compare to the program that we rolled out right after COVID? Do you know how many we put out there?
We had about the same, 200, something like that, 200 of those signs, I believe.
Okay, so we can at least cover all those locations plus maybe some.
That's the plan, is to go back and look at those more congested areas and install those. Again, we're looking at splitting these equally between North Glendale and South Glendale, and then we're going to have a online petition that people can basically submit their request, and then we'll evaluate it.
Okay. 2 more things, sorry. On to slide 15, the Beeline fleet. And this may be a longer discussion that we don't want to have now, but I'm interested in the usage of the Beeline, how that's been coming back after COVID, and also this Fairless program. I know LA has, our Metro has a Fairless program. I'm sure you know more detail, like how that's been rolled out. And I thought there was another program. There was one for low income, one for students, and we're participating in one but not the other. And kind of I'm interested in that and the budgetary impacts of us doing that, because anything that we can do to kind of bring in more ridership would be great.
Absolutely. So in terms of, we already have discounts for students and for the seniors and low-income residents. The Fairless program we looked at, it had about $1 million impact to our budget on an annual basis. So, and we weren't getting, we couldn't count on getting sustained funding to replenish that. So we are in the same situation as a lot of other operators. We're a tier 2 operator. We don't have a lot of funding sources, but we do have the reduced fares for students and seniors.
Okay, well, I'd like us to look at, what could we do to, to increase ridership? I think probably the main thing is the frequency of service. And I know it's hard to ride empty buses around. So it's like a chicken and an egg thing. How do you get people to do it? And do you invest up front? And take a little bit of a loss in order to start encouraging more people to ride. So I'd like us to really, look at that, because I think it's going to be important to get people used to, once you get them on, a few times, they get used to the routes, then they'll take them more often.
And to your point, we did do that study back in 2019. We did a study that resulted in shifting and modifying some of our routes. We, eliminated some routes and we added some routes, and the frequency, that was just before COVID hit. And of course, with COVID, we made all of our fares free, but there was a substantial decline in, in people that rode the buses. With COVID hopefully being under control, we're hoping that the ridership will increase. We're monitoring it on a weekly and monthly basis. We have an active outreach program that we're doing, but we will certainly look at any other options to do what we can to increase ridership.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Najarian.
Thank you. Couple questions. So we've got a couple major projects coming through Glendale. One is the BRT. I know most of that, if not all of it, is funded by Metro. Are we responsible for any of the station improvements or any of our roadway improvements to make that a reality?
We are for some. We're working with Metro on some, and some of the portion of the route for BRT dovetails with, for example, the street rehab projects that we have. But the main funding, as you mentioned, comes from Metro.
Metro had a policy where the local jurisdictions had to contribute 3% to any transit line that comes through. Are they holding that to us? Are they holding us to that? Or there hasn't been any talk about that?
As far as I know, that hasn't changed, but I can follow up on
Okay.
that.
Let me know if
Sure.
maybe we can get that waived in some manner. One of the most dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous rail crossing in Southern California is right here in our backyard, on our side yard, actually, on Doran. And Metro and Metrolink have been working on plans for a grade separation, both at Doran and at Sperry, I believe. And I think that's running into the tens of millions, if not up to hundreds of millions of dollars. Is Glendale factoring that construction and maintenance expenses? I know we split with LA to some degree. Are we factoring that into this year's budget?
Councilmember Najarian, that's a great question, and we're actively discussing that with Metro right now. They have made some proposals that we're reviewing in terms of the O&M, depending on the location of the improvement, but we haven't finalized those yet.
Okay. And that's very critical because the trains come down that curve. Line of sight is blocked. It's shaded by the freeway shadows. You've got the propane plant right next to it. You've got the 134 freeway right above it. Boy, you know, if there was a collision with a truck that got stuck on the tracks, it could really be a tragic episode. So I know we're trying to work on that as quickly as possible. So with regard to the pavements, are we insisting that they use graphene in the paving? Graphene is, as you know, is a two-dimensional compound which adds to the durability and prevents the aging and cracking of the asphalt. It used to be rubber. Rubberized asphalt was the thing 10 years ago. Now graphene is the new thing. Are we requiring that be mixed into the asphalt compound?
Councilmember Najarian, not to my knowledge. We are basically, we're using the asphalt rubber hot mix. You know, we have different specifications that, you know, we use and we've adopted. But I can definitely check on that to see if we're specifying those. But our standard is mainly the ARHM that we're using.
Okay. Let's check into that graphene. I know other municipalities worldwide are just starting to catch on, and it's claimed to be a game changer in the pavement process. So that would be good. And even if we have to do it just as a pilot or a test project for our next repaving, I think it would be worth, you know, to see how it actually holds up.
Absolutely, we'll check into it.
And so my last comment is, as we're doing these repavings, and even when we're not doing the repaving, we've had some comments by residents on the streets that have speed humps on them. And there's different designs of speed humps, speed bumps, speed lumps, speed tables, dots, and all that. Do we plan to upgrade the type and design of speed humps in certain, where we're using them? You know, Mr. and Mrs. Sulahian from Ethel Street, whom I'm sure you have had contact with, really complain that the current design, although it may cause, there's two speeds. You can either go over it below 20 and get past it without difficulty, or go above 40 and your suspension absorbs it. It's true. I mean, I haven't tried it. I'm usually below 20, and that's a pain for me. But are we looking into upgrading that? Those were the early, well, that was back in, I know when I was on the Transportation Commission back in '97, we came up with the toolkit, traffic calming toolkit, and that was the standard design at that time. And I now realize that there are many more designs which cause the vehicles to really forced to slow down to that 20-mile-an-hour speed. So do we upgrade those as we either repave or as we maintain the ones that we have? And is there a budget impact to that? I know they're not expensive, but do we do that?
That's actually a good question that we're looking at right now. There are different designs and the difference of half an inch at the crown or 1 inch. So we are looking at standardizing the speed humps. There is, I know in that area, there's several speed humps, and one of them is more effective than the others. And so we're looking at that, and our traffic engineering section is coming up with a template design that basically hopefully will discourage that kind of speeding, even if you have an SUV. However, in addition to that, speed humps, depending on how high your chassis is on the SUV, can go quickly. So we're supplementing that with these, what we call Caltrans's BOTS dots. These are dots that we're putting plus rumble strips. I think speed humps by themselves are not going to do the job. So we're going to actually augment that, and we have a pilot project that we're experimenting with right now, and it seems to be very effective to have the dots and the rumble strips so that when the cars hit those, basically are hitting 3 obstacle courses, and it's going to help in hopefully reducing the overall speed.
And I would ask that you coordinate with the fire department, because I know they were not very happy with the speed humps when we first put it through, especially on their primary response routes. And there was a big controversy over that when they went in. So as they're taking a patient or as they're taking a call or returning to a hospital, seconds count for a cardiac patient or any sort of a severe trauma. And the argument that they made at that time, I don't know, Chief Hinz or Chief Gray, I forget who it was that we've got to slow down to get over those. So let's at least touch base with them so they don't,
Absolutely.
so we don't foil their quick response times that they work so hard to make.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Najarian?
I just have a follow-up question. I just have a follow-up question on the rumble strips. Now, I understand that they're noisy when the car goes, so have you gotten any feedback from residents? Are you putting these on residential streets, the rumble strips?
Councilmember Devine, yes, that is correct, but this is a modified version of the rumble strips, so it's not as, the height is not as high, so it's a little bit lower. It will still make noise, which is why we're experimenting with it in a remote area, just with our trucks. Once we have it finalized, then actually we're working with one of the neighborhoods right now for them to do these petitions and to experiment with it, because there is a trade-off, speeding versus noise.
Right.
So we feel that we've optimized this as much as possible. We'll install these and experiment with them, and once the neighborhood agrees to that, and we can go from there. We can always remove them if there's excessive.
Yeah, I know I had suggested that on Glen Oaks, and I was told it was too noisy, so hopefully that pilot will achieve. And also, back on the speed bumps, just very quickly, there's one on it's either Geneva or Jackson that you could be going 5 miles per hour, and once you hit that, man, your car just shakes, bump. It's a huge bump. So I don't know if that should be reported. Is that something that maybe is could be mitigated?
Are you saying that's a good thing or a bad thing?
It's not a good, it's not, I mean, when you see the sign bump coming, you slow down. This one, you could practically stop and still hit, so it's a blessing and a curse,
We'll check it.
Yeah.
We'll check on it.
Okay, thank you. I'll figure out where it is, and then I'll let you know. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Amrani and Mr. Galanian, for the presentation. Do you want to sit down, by the way? I don't want to I know that you're recouping, and I don't want to keep you on your feet.
It's okay. I'm good.
Actually, that's good for him.
All right. I'll try to ask a lot of questions. Well, thank you for this presentation. This is, I guess, the presentation where the rubber actually really meets the road, right? So in terms of you mentioned the PCI rating, that we're better than the state average. I wasn't sure what the state average is. So does anyone know what the state average is that they can share? 66, was it?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, my recollection, last time I saw the report was the statewide average was 66.
And in terms of the increment, because we're what, at 71, 72, you said?
I believe we're currently at 72.
How does that compare between 66 and 72? I don't know how these increments and how the point system works. Is that considerably better? Is it sort of better?
State obviously has a lot of roads, but the way to look at it is if you're in the 60s, you're not doing good. So that would be like a D. The 70s, the 70 to 75 is average to good, because again, it's not like the school that nobody has 100 or 90. Sure. So you have to kind of bring it down one level. So if you're in the 70s, you're doing good. 80s obviously is much better. But in practical terms, what it means is that the higher the PCI, you don't have as many streets that need reconstruction. And you're basically trying to prevent the other streets from getting to that reconstruction by doing the overlays, the thin overlays, the thicker overlays, to make sure that they maintain their structural integrity. And for the higher PCIs, like in the 80s, you want to make sure that you do the crack sealing and the slurry seal on a regular basis to seal in the properties.
And I know we've spent some time on this, and I'm glad that this council is focusing on our infrastructure a little bit more and focusing on it closely. And our current, or in the past, we're just trying to maintain or at least slow down the rate at which our roads are degrading. Is it realistic for us to have a goal of increasing that PCI figure from the 72 to, say, 75, or to get it as close to 75 as possible?
That's an excellent question. That would be always the goal, to try to increase the PCI, because again, it'll shave the backlog that you have on the major road repairs, like reconstruction or very major overlays. However, we feel that with the direction that your council gave us last year and with the increase that we got on Measure S, that if we can get a hold of or get in front of the PCIs and preventing it from sliding any further, once we've stabilized that, then that would be the next phase for our next CIP cycle, to try to go for increasing our PCIs.
All right, thank you. And as we continue this discussion, I'm sure there'll be reports that'll come back. There will be presentations on bids that will be brought forth to this council. If we can have also graphically represent where we predict to be and how we can increase from 72 to 75 when we anticipate that happening, I think that would be helpful, and hopefully it'll be a marker for councils moving forward to say, okay, this is where we are, this is where we are going. In terms of the presentation, I know that Councilmember Brotman brought up the e-pave projects, or the cool reflective surface projects. I know that the vendor that you're experimenting with is also in discussions with the Army Corps of Engineers for their product, and I know that we're doing our own tests. If we find that the Army Corps of Engineers test results are satisfactory to us, I'd urge us to look at those to see how we can expand our use of the product. Certainly the Army Corps of Engineers has greater resources than we do, and we don't want to double up on the work that's being done. And I think they may have even done it in other cities. So let's look at their studies as well. Shelters, thank you for mentioning that. Rumble strips and speed humps, I concur with my colleagues. I think I've mentioned this a few times, that if we can make it easier for neighborhoods to install those, even if it means, I understand the safety aspects of it in terms of our emergency responses, we can certainly consult with them. But ultimately, we do have to do something to slow down the overall. I know that seconds matter in those life-saving moments, but also we have great healthcare services. Our paramedics are excellent. They're providing more immediate care than needed. But we also have the safety concerns of pedestrians and people using the roads and others. Parking meter replacement, is that part of this budget? I know that we're marching forward towards having electronic and digital methods of payment besides the kiosks, hopefully having what some other cities have, which is an app or a QR code, so we're not completely reliant on the old-fashioned coin-operated meters. Where do we stand with that, and how is that incorporated into the budget?
Mayor Kasakian, we are actively moving forward, as you mentioned. In fact, we are expecting the proposals for that to come back by mid-month, later on this month. So we're very hopeful to make a selection and bring it before your council so that they can start work in early July timeframe. So what that's going to do is basically look at apps for paying with your phone or with credit card. So we're looking at all those options and have included that as part of our RFP process. And that budget has been rolled into our budget for next year.
Thank you. And I hope everyone who's watching or who may watch this will hear that because it's coming, and hopefully it'll come soon. That's probably something that I hear more often than anything else around the city. I know that the city manager also we were discussing then, and I think your kids brought that up to you at one day as well.
In an effort to embarrass me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what kids sometimes do best to their parents. So bulky item pickup, I know that we have individuals that we've shuffled around as was presented to us, and we've put them in places elsewhere where they're needed, but there continues to be a problem. It is prevalent all over the city with individuals, I'm sure some from outside of the city, using our streets as dump grounds for large items. How are we tackling this outside of the expectation of the vendors who we've contracted with for the various zones to make sure that our streets are clean?
Mayor Kasakian, so we have our own crews that are responsible for going around and picking up the bulky items in the non-commercial areas for residential areas. In addition, we have an outside contract that we are going to continue because of the issue that you mentioned, the prevalence. So we're attacking it from both sides, and as you observed correctly, the 4 vendors that we have are required to drive all the routes that they're responsible for on a daily basis, and they have these roving trucks that is supposed to look for trash and for bulky items, and illegal dumping is what it is, and pick those up. And we get regular reports of those on a monthly basis.
We need to have some communication and clearer understanding as to what everyone's roles are. There it was, on my route to City Hall and just going and running errands, corner of Pacific and Glen Oaks, I can swear there was the same shopping cart that was there for weeks on end, right? So if these individuals are going around the city and on a major intersection, especially in our downtown, they're not seeing these things, it is of concern to me. Also, I've mentioned this to the city manager. We have a number of newsstands that are not being used for disseminating any type of published materials that are essentially being used for trash receptacles. If we need to remove them, let's remove them. If we need to contact the people who allegedly own them, we need to tell them that it's their responsibility to maintain them. Our streets, our sidewalks, everything. Certainly, we are better than some of the neighboring cities. You can go to neighboring cities and you'll see their sidewalks, their roads look like their skate parks. Ours are much better, but we still should strive to do even better than we are. And lastly, I don't want to be the harbinger of constantly bringing up issues of doom and gloom, but this budget is considering that we continue to receive revenue from our Shoal Canyon landfill, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so as we have discussions moving forward, we need to also have a realistic picture as to what happens to this budget. And all the things we just asked you to do that are going to cost money, what happens when that revenue stream ends?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Member City Council, per your direction, we have assembled a team that are working on the impacts of the closure of the landfill. We are evaluating the available capacity at the landfill currently and working on finalizing a report that will come to council with all that information that you requested. The impact, as you mentioned, I apologize, Mr. Mayor, the financial impact we'll probably see in 2 to 3 years from now.
And that will be here before we even know it. And so, all the consternation, concerns we've had from individuals who are already worried about how this transition has gone with the commercial, we're going to be hearing that from our residents and stakeholders again. So thank you for this presentation. Thank you.
I'm
yes,
sorry, I have a question.
Councilmember Agajanian.
As far as I know, we are not picking up, the commercial entities, they are not picking up the bulky items like what we used to do. They come 4 times a year. Before the residents, they could call and say, I have a bulky item, I will put it outside tomorrow or 2 days later, and it would be picked up. But now, they're not doing it. These commercial entities, they're not doing it.
Councilmember Ajanian, they are picking up the illegal dumpings. So they go around and they look for anything that's dumped on the side, but you're correct. Based on our contract that we have with them for bulky items, these are the ones that people call in to schedule. It's 4 times a year.
That's not enough. 4 times a year for bulky items is like nothing.
That's we had it unlimited, and we still do for our residential. However, that's pretty much the industry standard in any commercial franchise that picks up bulky items is no more than 3 to 4 times a year, because negotiating an unlimited bulky item pickup it's not really feasible.
No, what I'm worried is that we are encouraging people to illegally dump it somewhere, which they were not doing before. They learned, because I remember, I've been in Glendale for 42 years. Before they would, at night, they would dump somewhere until they learned that our city is picking it up for free, and they can put it outside and it will be picked up. And now we are not doing that, so we are going back to the situation at night. They will come out and they dump their furnitures outside, which really bothers me.
We are monitoring this on a monthly basis with both our crews and with the vendors' crews in terms of the quantity and the tonnage. It does get seasonal from time to time during the, as we get close to holidays, it becomes more and then it tapers up. So it goes through peaks, but we are monitoring the tonnage on an ongoing basis.
And then what will happen? You are monitoring, then what will happen?
Mr. Mayor, Member of City Council, Councilmember Agajanian, that's a valid point. Quite frankly, that program of unlimited collection and pickup is not financially sustainable. I have directed Public Works to look into other means of outreach and perhaps punitive mitigations that will address this ongoing prolific abandonment of bulky items. Something has to be done differently. Other cities have already started doing that. So once we get the data, we will look into, like I said, an alternative ways of handling this as opposed to unlimited collection.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. The last suggestion I would make is, I know that in this presentation, and I know the audience, intended audience is the council, because we're the ones giving the direction, reviewing the budget, trying to figure out what to do moving forward. But there's always a mention of a lot of these measures, a lot of various propositions or funds from which we benefit. It would be, I think, helpful to have an appendix or brief explanation somewhere, whether it's online or elsewhere, as to what these funds are, where they come from, how they can be used. So when we're making asks, we have a clearer understanding of how we can expend and distribute our resources accordingly.
Most definitely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Golan.
All right. Next up is Glendale Water and Power.
One moment, Councilmember Brotman.
There's a caller.
Oh, yes, there was one caller. There is one caller, Mr. Eisenberg. Thank you.
David Eisenberg, you have 3 minutes. David, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Good morning, Mayor Kasakian and council members. I want to thank you for, again, meeting in the morning and spending your extra time doing this. I'd like to be clear that, you know that normally I represent organizations. I'm not representing organizations today. I'm calling as a concerned citizen about line item 5300, which is it's been discussed a bit by Mayor Kasakian and it brought up the subject, and then it was continued by Councilmember Agajanian, the bulky pickup issue. You all have saved almost $6 million by switching to these commercial accounts. That's on the lines 5.7, what's the exact number, $5.757 million that you saved by this contract. And what's happened to us that live in a commercial building, I live in a condo, there's apartments near me, is that our trash rates have tripled. As soon as that went into effect, we got an immediate tax. All the programs you talk about that I've heard at City Council about, the organic recycles and how this is all automatic, that's not for us. You know, we're under penalty, but we don't get an organic container delivered. We have to request it for a commercial building. The signs that are there, there's a large number of Armenians in our apartment and in the city. The signs that are provided by Athens are in English and Spanish. We've asked for explanations for how to use it, because we don't want to put a bin in if nobody knows how to use it that's explained in all 3 languages, and they haven't ever answered us. And then I want to talk about the bulky pickup. If I'm in a single-family home, I can put items out. And even if you end up restricting it to 4 times, I can put, my family could put 4 bulky pickups out. And you can do that if you live in an apartment that has 1, 2, 3, or 4 units. Each of those, you have unlimited pickup for those units. As soon as you get to 5 units, you can have only 4 pickups for the entire building. That's less than 1 pickup per person per year. After that, they charge a fee of $35. Well, I live in a 50-unit condominium in downtown Glendale, as do 70% of the residents of Glendale, all the renters, all the condominium owners. So we get 4 pickups, and then we get charged $35 each person. And I'd like you to see you look at some of these funds, these $5.75 million that you saved on our backs, to adjust that so that it's not 4 pickups per building, it's 4 pickups per unit.
Thank you.
that call
Thank you.
in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eisenberg. We will take your comments into consideration, and I know that staff has heard you loud and clear. Mr. Imrani, I'm going to ask you for one more question, and I apologize. It was something that I had written in my notes and I overlooked, and it was a major item. Our sewer line maintenance. Can you please briefly tell us where we are with probably one of our most overlooked and deferred infrastructure needs?
Thank you for that question, Mayor Kasakian, and that is correct. Our sewers are very old, and
How old are they?
they're less than 100 years old, but they're getting there. So we have essentially a map of underground network of sewer lines that we don't know a whole lot about. So we have started a program of CCTV, televising basically our underground sewer lines, which kicked off actually a couple of weeks ago. And we're being a little bit ambitious about it. We're planning on finishing the whole system in 3 years. We've started the first third of the system this year. And it's going to entail basically, once we're done, we're going to have a very detailed map of every crack and every hole and every defect essentially that the sewer line has. We also last year completed a comprehensive sewer master plan, which provided us with the hydraulic capacity of our sewer lines in terms of whether or not we have to upsize our pipes. So the hydraulic upgrades plus the structural upgrades that we're going to put together a very comprehensive CIP for upgrading our sewer lines, because once you have a defect, as you know, in the pipe and it progressively gets worse and worse, then the sewer exfiltrates, it can saturate the ground, and we can have a sinkhole and not even knowing it. So we're actively investigating it and putting together a report to address that issue.
Besides the sinkholes, it's about wasted water as well, as we're using more reclaimed water to use for various needs, including watering our own public rights of way, whatever it may be. We can't waste a single drop, no matter where it comes from.
Absolutely.
So our system is almost or approaching 100 years old.
In some areas, that is
Some
correct.
areas, and we are now, it'll take 3 years for us to assess the full needs of replacing it.
That is correct.
All right. More money required for that. Thank you very much. Mr. Galanian.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next is Glendale Water and Power, another very large department in the city organization, comprised of 5 divisions. Electric services, that involved in maintaining safety and reliability of electrical infrastructure, service and delivery. And in a similar fashion, water services involved in the same aspect of work, but in water, obviously. Power management, responsible for establishing the utilities resource portfolio, including clean energy. Business services, focused on the modernization and security of business enterprise, critical systems, IT, customer service, marketing, and public benefits. And finally, administration, focused on utility-related legislative and regulatory processes, fleet administrative functions. The personnel numbers consist of, at the adopted budget last year, was 343.3 FTEs. We are going to see a net increase of 7 positions in total FTEs. And this is as a result of, as you recall, last Tuesday evening, your approval to add 8 crew members to the underground distribution construction mechanics crews, and that is offset by the reduction of 1 FTE, which was the environmental programs administrator that we talked about earlier during Public Works presentation. There's an increase of hourly FTEs, and almost half of it is an electrical engineering customer service team that's going to help reduce the processing times of some of our building permits. The budget overview for GWP contains 10 funds. Again, 291, and all of these have zeros at the end. 291, Electric Public Benefit Fund, is a reduction of $1.2 million. This is primarily due to, if you recall, Back on Track low-income program that we had anticipated using $2 million. This will not continue in next fiscal year. This was a program that Council had implemented during the pandemic. It lasted 2 months from July to end of August, and we paid out $489,000, and 530 accounts participated in this program. This is going to be replaced by the state's, bless you, Electric Cap and Water CWWAP assistance program. The reduction is offset by a $420,000 increase in the low-income discount program, which is going to go up from $15 a month to $17.50 a month. In 582, the primary reasons for the increase is $17.1 million, and the cost of purchasing natural gas, which is, to your point, Mr. Mayor, it's gone up. It's going to go up 70% higher than last year. $4.2 million in power purchase. This is double what the cost was last year. This is to generate power at the Magnolia and Grayson plants. $2.4 million in carbon allowances, and $4.7 million in your normal salaries, benefits, hourly wages, medical insurance costs, etc. In 583, Electric Depreciation Fund, the primary reasons for increase is, as again you recall previously approved, $26 million for Shoal Biogas Renewable Energy Project, $4.1 million for the upgrade of our transmission lines from 4 kV to 12 kV, $2.5 million for solar design and build program on city facilities, $1.8 million increase in fleet cost, $900,000 for EV chargers, and lastly, $500,000 for electric meter upgrade. In 592, Waterworks Revenue Fund. This is their maintenance and operation fund, and increases include $900,000 for purchase of imported water, $520 for salaries, benefits, medical insurance, $450 for utilities, and another $190 for equipment repair. In 593, Water Depreciation Fund, the reasons for the increase is $2 million to upgrade 23% of water endpoints, $530 in water storage tank rehabilitation program, and $200,000 in water pipeline management program that I will cover shortly. Another $180,000 increase in water quality enhancement, and these are offset by a $1.9 million decrease in water pumping unit replacement. You see a total increase of 19% in GWP's budget, and that equates to $70 million. I'll quickly cover some of the highlights of that department's projects and programs. But before I do that, although we are not specifically seeking new appropriations for the Grayson proposed Grayson repowering project at this time, or for clean energy programs, I thought we'd provide a quick update on the status of these projects. So essentially, staff's continuing working on plans for the separation of Unit 9, demolition and preparation of the site. The RFP for additional DER is almost completed. We anticipate to release that RFP on May 16th. Tesla battery storage and thermal generation design for Wärtsilä engines, and all of this per City Council's direction. The obvious benefits are obviously replace the aging infrastructure to maintain reliability, as well as allowing for integration of new clean energy resources. Installation of EV chargers. Staff's working on identifying additional locations, designing these projects, and getting permits before they install these chargers. Just a quick update on the status. GWP has already installed 16 level 2 chargers, 1 DC fast charger, and planning on additional 26 level 2 chargers and 1 more DC fast charger in the next 3 months, pending supply chain issues for some of the equipment. GWP actually had a goal to install 30 charging stations each fiscal year. They are set to exceed that by at least 40 stations in next fiscal year, hence an increase in appropriation from $500,000 to $1.4 million, and this will be from the Low Carbon Fuel Standard Program revenue. We are seeking appropriation of, like I mentioned, $1.4 million out of the electric depreciation fund. The locations, the proposed locations are Pacific Park, Glendale Sports Complex, curbside at Maple Park and Palmer Park, just to name a few. One of the major programs that Water Services Division is involved in is the Water Pipeline Management Program. The plan is to replace over 11,000 feet of, and sewer lines are not the only aging and old system in the city. These are 96-year-old 4-inch cast iron pipes, replacing with 8-inch ductile iron pipes to minimize unplanned outages due to main breaks and service leaks. This will improve water system reliability and quality, and replace and add fire hydrants to meet current spacing requirements, as well as reduce energy used in pumping. We are seeking $5.9 million out of Water Depreciation Fund. Next up is a fiber network backbone that has been brought up by the City Council and given staff direction. The plan is to complete the construction of the fiber network backbone over a 2-year period, next year and the following year. This will provide high-speed broadband communication services to businesses and city facilities and help economic growth and hopefully increase revenue. We are seeking $3.5 million appropriation out of electric depreciation fund for next fiscal year and carrying over $4 million from previous years. Some of the site locations include the Marketplace parking structure, Fremont Park, the Public Works Yard on Chevy Chase Drive, Palanconi Park on Grandview, and Montrose Park, with an estimated cost of $6.4 million. As you are well aware of the plans for a virtual power plant, the goal and the plan is to install solar and battery storage systems on single-family and multifamily residential properties. This will be up to 15 megawatts per council's recent direction. We are currently finalizing negotiations with the vendor. The benefits obviously will include providing local renewable solar energy and help reduce reliance on important electric generation. We are seeking $2.5 million out of the Electric Works Revenue Fund. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, that concludes my presentation on the GWP budget. Staff from various divisions within that department are available to respond to your questions. Thank you very much.
Which of my colleagues would like to go first? Councilmember Brotman.
Today. Let me go back. So on 20, can you, I didn't catch this, why the public benefit fund is decreasing?
Mr. Mayor, member of City Council, allow me to invite Craig Cunin, Assistant General Manager, to respond to your comment.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Rodman, Public Benefit Fund, we had that program for helping with arrearages. It was a limited program. We had budgeted $2 million for that program. We spent like 400 and some thousand. That was basically taken over by the state programs that they started around September. So that $2 million is not part of this budget request. That program went away. So that was the reduction when in the annual budget.
Oh, okay, so in other words, you're saying the 8.7, 8.8 million from last year was kind of bumped
It was
up?
kind of bumped up because of
Back to
COVID. And
normal?
now we're back down to normal.
Okay,
That-
okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Well, I might need you up here for some of these. You mentioned the RFP for additional DERs. One thing I hear a lot about from people is how long it's taking to get solar projects permitted. And when I ask, it seems like it's always when they're putting in a battery. Why is it taking, and people are saying it's taking like 9 months and it's, you know, and I mean, obviously we want people to be putting in these batteries at their own expense. So what's going on there? That may not be you, yeah.
That would be this person right here, Dan.
Yeah, Dan Scorza, Assistant General Manager, Electric. Mr. Mayor, Councilman Brotman, I'll have to look into that, but generally what happens is our number of provisions is that when you get solar and batteries, each requires a meter to be installed. Now, we've been working on limiting that and not having a meter for each device. Now, depending on the size, we may even eliminate the meter. That will speed up the process, because when you put a meter in, it has to be a panel upgrade, locations found, so that sometimes increases the time. Also, we were short on staff. With this budget, we're increasing help to process the permits and do the spot checks and the engineering required and the permitting processing required. So I would suppose now with the new budget in place, we would be shortening that time.
We have a goal for how long it should take?
generally, pre-COVID, we were doing everything in 2 to 3 weeks. Post-COVID, it became 6 weeks plus because of access and, getting the processing, and then we had some staff loss as well. We're going to try to get back to the 2 to 3 weeks timeframe to get these permits done.
I mean, people are telling me, I'm hearing like 9 months. I heard yesterday somebody was complaining about how long it's taking.
Yeah, I would have to check. 9 months sounds an awful long time, unless there were some other circumstances with the construction. So,
And I've heard it multiple times. And whenever somebody says taking really long, I say, is there a battery involved? And they say yes. So there's something about the battery that's really taking a long time.
well, again, if you had solar, it would get a meter. If you had a battery, it gets a meter. But now we're trying to change that, so it should be a lot shorter. And plus, we're getting extra staff to process the permits.
Okay, well, anything we can do, I mean, we really should make that a very smooth and
Yes,
and
we
simple
agree.
process for our
Mr. Mayor,
homeowners.
member of City Council, we will look into, like Mr. Scorza mentioned, we will, with the addition of hourly positions, I'm optimistic that we can cut that processing period significantly. We will look into those processes and see where we can streamline, because we know that's important to council, and we'll let you know of the progress that we have made.
Okay, thanks. On the EV chargers, one question is, how do people, once we have this whole network installed, how would I, as an EV owner, know where they are? Like, is there going to be an app and I can see where they are and if they're available? Because the worst thing is you hate to drive up to something and then it's not available, or you don't even know where it is in the first place.
Good morning, City Council members. My name is Herbert Garcia, PBC Marketing Manager. In regards to locating the stations, it'll be posted in our website, GWP website. There's also apps available. So if you're an EV driver, depending on the service that you use to charge your car, there's apps, and apps do have the ability to show you a map of where these are located. And so there's multiple apps out there that are available for residents to locate these. So we're also trying to implement a new website that will educate customers on EV, and it'll also include a map for them to locate all these charging stations.
Okay, well, if we could look into how to make that more accessible to people. I mean, ideally, you have an app that's and since they're all hours, we should know when they're being used. Is there a way that we can make that available on an app? You could see whether a station is free to use. I don't mean free.
Correct.
No cost.
Most apps, and then there's nonprofit organizations as well that have apps, and they show you the availability of the chargers as well. So if you go to an app, it'll PlugShare, for example, it's a very common app, and it'll show you in green if the station is available in Glendale, anywhere in Glendale. It doesn't necessarily have to be city-owned chargers. They can be privately owned, but publicly accessible chargers, and it will still show you if they're being used real-time or not. So it shows you real-time usage as far as the stations themselves.
Okay. And then what do we, the way we charge for users, do we, what rate structure do we use? And do we charge like more if it's in those hours that we, where energy costs us a lot, like in those afternoon, early evening hours? Because it seems like, it'd be great if you could make it like it's almost free or it's really cheap during the middle of the day when there's tons of solar, but it's, a lot more expensive in the evening hours when we're,
Currently, the rate structure that we have is 20 cents per kWh for a level 2 charger. If it's a higher power charger, it's 33 cents per kWh. And that's just enough to recoup our expense and the usage. But we currently don't have any other structure as far as the rates.
Okay, could we look at that? I mean, I think that would make sense. As we build that network out and more people are using it, like, let's figure out how we get people to just use it during the middle of the day. I mean, if we, and make it expensive during those hours that we don't want people using it, right?
We'll make a note and look into that as well.
Yeah. Then I have, let's see, I have a question. Oh, back to batteries. And I think, Craig, this is probably for you, but at one time you mentioned a program that was not through the virtual power plant, but for somebody that has solar already, that wants to put in a battery and is willing to kind of have it be part of a network so that GWP can pull from it. Is that program, is that happening? Did I just dream that up?
No, we had offered in PBC 2 programs. One was residential battery storage for customers that already have solar. And then we were also going to look at a large business program for solar and battery. That's kind of been delayed because of this new clean energy RFP we're putting out. We didn't want to have 2 RFPs on the street at the same time. Plus, we may get responses to the clean energy RFP that's going out in the middle of May that will apply to these programs. But we still have these programs. We still plan on developing something there.
Okay, well, I'm eager to see that come out. There are a lot of people that have solar that want a battery.
Oh, yeah,
and,
there's quite a few.
It would be good for us, right, if we can tap into that battery
It would
power
be
when we
great
need it.
if we had batteries on all those houses and that we could control them similar to what we're going to do for the Sunrun program.
Okay, so last thing is about recycled water. So I know that's, and I know that, we've talked about this before, that something like, is it 70% or 60% of the water that we have rights to, once it's treated, we end up dumping in the LA River because we don't have the infrastructure to get it out to where it can be used. And I was just wondering, what's our plan to make better use of that recycled water? And a specific question is fire hydrants. Do we use recycled water for fire hydrants, or do we use potable water?
Mayor Kasaki and members of the council, Michael DeGhetto, Chief AGM for Water. Councilmember Brotman, so there were multiple questions in that I'll try and cover. We're currently only using about half of the recycled water that we have available from the Legwarp treatment plant. There are multiple issues associated with why we're not using more. The main reason would be is the infrastructure necessary to put in piping to transmit that water to a place of use is very expensive. It's like building another water system, a duplicate water system. So what we focused on was taking out large non-potable uses off of our potable system. And really, the city was like very far ahead in building. The plant went in service in 1976, and the city built a main in 1978 to Grayson Power Plant to use in the cooling towers. So since then, in the 90s, there was a big program, and that's where the major backbone of our purple pipe system was installed. So for example, Forest Lawn, Oakmont Country Club, the street medians and things that we could pick up along the way where those pipelines were put in. A lot of GOSD schools, GCC campus. We use recycled water in those non-potable areas. So there's not really much of an opportunity. Our plans are to continue into Chevy Chase Canyon. So that's one major extension that's left to take out some big users along that route.
And Fremont Park, is that another one that I thought we were going to get, that we're not into?
That's part of the discussion, I think, with redesigning Fremont Park that I don't think is finished yet, related to, is it going to be grass? Is it going to be artificial turf? And I'll just wait to find out if we're going to be the supplier for recycled water there. So the rest of that water that we have available, what we're waiting for is the state to have regulations for what's called direct potable reuse. Once those regulations are finalized, we have some options to where we could treat that water further and use it to supplement potable water. And that's less expensive because we already have the potable water distribution system in place. And I think I missed a question.
Fire hydrants.
Oh, no, we use potable water for our fire hydrants. And again, that's related to the piping and pump stations in the distribution system involved. Our recycled water system isn't sized in a way to provide the fire flow, both in storage and both in the volume needed for the fire hydrants, whereas our potable system is. So our potable system is designed to meet the fire requirements.
Okay. So I guess what you're saying is it's more cost-effective to turn that recycled water into potable water than it is to build out the piping infrastructure to get the recycled water to more landscape areas.
And there just aren't those landscaped areas available that
Right.
would justify that cost.
Okay,
Because we've
thank you.
hit the big ones so far, except in Chevy Chase Canyon.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone? No? No comments? All right. Well, I appreciated a lot of the work that you're putting into expanding the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I've brought that up, and I'm glad that we're making some serious headway, it looks like. In terms of solar panels, I know that in these chambers and previous councils, well, let me ask, do we have any callers?
Mayor, we have no callers.
We have no callers, all right. We have had discussions about installation of solar panels. There was some back and forth. I know that folks at one point were concerned about how it may change how certain homes look or neighborhoods look, but I believe that we have broken through that barrier, pushed beyond it, and the climate crisis and what we're facing has necessitated for us to kind of put our sensibilities and our tastes aside in the interests of having cleaner power generation. Yet, it seems as though we're still lagging in terms of permitting processes. I have also heard similar concerns as Councilmember Brotman has, as I'm sure everyone here has. So whatever we can do to make sure that that process is smoother, faster, it is now a part of very robust part of a growing economy locally. There's people who have been doing it for so long and know what they're doing and how they're doing it, that we should not be the hindrance for this to be rolled out. In regards to that, I even heard that there is there's an application that you could download, and you can have an automated approval of application to have solar panels placed versus having to come down and have staff look at it based on certain parameters. And if other cities are using that, let's do it. Whatever we can. The goal of our city should be, and the goal of staff should be, how do we make it easier for people to draw less energy from our system and to be energy neutral, independent, less polluting. So I would encourage us to look into that, as well as trying to incentivize lower water usage. And some of the ways I think that we can do that is, first of all, this is going to be a cost, but what we save in terms of water wasted, I think, is important. We need to reintroduce a program of incentivizing people to do away with their lawns and large water consuming areas around the home, to have it replaced with more drought resistant local plants. Encouraging construction, new construction of apartments, to, if there's something that we can do to explore ways to have lower use water faucets. I know that low flow water faucets are already the norm, but you know, if we encourage some landlords to replace those faucets with timed hand faucets, like the ones where you wave your hand in front of and It only gives a certain amount of water, and then you have to use it again. That could cut down a significant portion. I know some landlords who have done it and have said it has cut down, the tenants have not complained, it has cut down the amount of water used significantly. And I think that's a interesting idea to look further into, as well as encouraging or requiring pool construction, especially new pools that are being done. All our swimming pools should have covers. Covering these swimming pools will help cut down a great amount of waste of water. And if there's any other suggestions as to how we can incentivize lower water usage, I'd like to hear it. I think that's very important for us to continue exploring that idea. Councilmember Devine?
I have a question about dual plumbing and the recent developments, especially in the downtown. Has there been any thought to transferring or converting to that, using potable instead of water?
Mayor Kasakian, Councilmember Devine, actually all new developments when they come in, apartment buildings and things like that, any of the landscaped area, we put a separate meter. So they have 2 meters. They have a meter for landscaping and a meter for the potable uses in the building. And if it's near a recycled main, we require them to attach their irrigation to recycled. Now, what that also affords by having the separate service is if at some point we do put a recycled main near their area, then we can just automatically convert the landscaped areas to recycled. Some developers will put in dual plumbing, but the thing about that is it's only for the toilets, right? It can't be for anything else. It can't be for the shower. It can't be for the sinks. So it's not like a huge savings, but some areas do that, especially when it's near a recycled main, because they might get some credit for their development for doing that. And some of the buildings, I know on the Disney campus, they're very forward looking towards that. They have dual plumbed, and Glendale City College has a lot of dual plumb facilities there, which makes a little more sense because those are much larger restrooms, right? So.
Sure. Do we have any kind of requirement or mandate in our development for this sort of dual plumbing, or do they just offer to do it?
It is required if recycled water is available. So if there's no main there, we're not going to require a developer to put a recycled main extension just to serve their restrooms. I will say when the Americana was built, that developer did extend our recycled system to get recycled water to that development.
Well, there you go. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. That explains that to me. Thanks.
Also, in terms of the batteries, I know that we're talking about increasing electric charging stations, the number of electric vehicles that the public will be using will increase, and all of that is great, including batteries for home storage. But have we thought far enough ahead to understand how we will have safe disposal of these battery units once they outlive their utility?
Mr. Mayor, council members, right now, when the public gets batteries, it is a partnership with the vendor. So normally batteries last 10 years, and there is some provisions to upgrade them. At the end of life, it would be with the vendors. In terms of the utility, maybe my other colleagues, maybe Mark knows a little more about the larger batteries, but generally you work with the vendor that you bought, because you buy these systems for 20, 25 years. And the hope is that the technology is developed where there is recycling of the materials. So that's what I hear is promising, and that just makes sense because the rare metals that are used to make these components are very expensive to get, so you could recycle it, then you have a local source to rebuild them.
Great, thank you. Not only very expensive to get, oftentimes just the process of getting them is not the most environmentally friendly or sustainable. process. I mean, ultimately, the lesson here is not to replace one with another, but for all of us to be more careful about how much overall we're using. That is all I have. I don't know if any of my colleagues have anything else they would like to add.
I just like to, again, kudos to staff for your preparedness and your show of expertise in your areas of public works and water and power. So good job.
Thank you very much. If there's any,
to adjourn.
well, before we do, what is coming up next? Give us
Yes,
a preview.
thank you, Mr.
Councilmember-
Mayor.
Andrew Galani.
Yes, in closing, just wanted to express my gratitude for spending 2 hours and 10 minutes of your Thursday morning, go through this budget study session. Next one's budget study session number 4 will take place Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. We will cover public safety, police and fire, obviously. And if at least we have one more follow-up per your inquiry today.
All right.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn? Moved and seconded by Councilmember Najarian. We are adjourned.
11.